Hey, you guys. Welcome to my Flickers of Fear show. And, for the month of December, we're doing a bunch of sort of winter-themed horror movies. And to that end, we are finally getting around to talking about one of my very, very favorite horror movies of the 1990s. Actually, probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I fucking love this movie. And I kind of feel like this is another one of those ones that when it came out back in 1999, I'm pretty sure like audiences didn't really know what to make of it because it's a very odd little movie. It doesn't really slot very easily into a single genre. So it really did very, very badly. Like it tanked at the theaters, and also it got a critical drubbing as well. So I kind of feel like a lot of people didn't get it. But over the decades, as a lot of awesome, great movies do, it sort of started to build up a cult following. Although I will say that I don't think the cult following for this one is as big as it probably should be, considering how fucking brilliant this movie is. And honestly, if you read a lot about what was going on behind the scenes of this movie, it's actually kind of incredible that a movie this good came out of the giant clusterfuck that was going on behind the scenes, which I'll get into in a bit. But so the movie that I'm talking about today, at last, is the 1999 film Ravenous. Now, I actually saw this movie when it came out in the theaters back in spring, I think, of 1999. I had seen the trailer, which you could tell that the production of this was actually a major studio film. I believe it was Fox. You could tell that from the trailer that they really had no idea how to market this, which I get. This is one of those movies that it's kind of a tough call to say, like, should we appeal, like, who should we appeal to? Because it has elements of a lot of different genres in it, and stuff that's like this, particularly because it kind of has a black humor sensibility to it as well. Those are always a hard sell, so I get it. But the trailer, I'm not really sure what they were going for with that. I did see the trailer when I was at the movies in the 90s, and I was just, in early 1999, and I definitely wanted to see it because, one, it's about cannibals, and two, Robert Carlyle is in it, and I fucking love Robert Carlyle. Like I said, I was really into, like, British cinema, so I had seen him in a lot of British films. I don't think the full Monty had come out yet at this point, but he'd been in Trainspotting, obviously. So he was kind of like a big name. I can't remember if Full Monty was before this or after this, but I had seen him in several movies, and, he's a Scottish actor, and I fucking love him. So I was just kind of like, well, I'm going to see anything with him in it because he's always fucking great. So I went to see this movie in 1999, and I think there was maybe 2 or 3 other people at the theater, and I don't think they got it at all. I saw the movie and I thought it was great. I thought it was just like gory and fun and hilarious in like a very blackly humorous kind of way, which is right up my alley. But I kind of feel like other people are just kind of like, what the fuck did I just watch? Like, they didn't really get it, because it is a very strange, it's a very tonally strange kind of movie. I almost want to say, do you remember like a couple weeks back when I reviewed that really weird Bob Balaban movie, Parents, from 1989, which is also about cannibals, but where it has this kind of weird, like, surreal, John Waters type of thing, but also kind of like horror, and it had like black comedy in it, but not overtly funny. This is kind of like that. I would call this movie, actually, if this isn't too weird a thing to say, maybe Parents meets Bone Tomahawk. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, I think all of the 3 of those movies would make like a really good cannibal movie night. So just saying, that's like a recommendation if you ever have anybody over that are really into cannibal movies, like weird, blackly comedic, gruesome cannibal movies, then I think those 3 would be a good triple feature, because they, other than Bone Tomahawk, which is more serious, and Parents, which is more surreal, this one is almost kind of like in the middle of those, because it has serious elements to it, it has gruesome elements to it, but it's also funny, but again, like Parents, not overtly funny. The funny comes more from just it's very gallows humor, and it comes more from just the quirks of the characters rather than them being like jokes. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror comedy. It's sort of like a western black comedy horror something. You know what I mean? It's really not categorizable by any stretch of the imagination. So what ended up happening with this film, I guess, as I said, it's a major, it's a major studio was putting it out. The screenwriter of this was Ted Griffin, who later on would do Ocean's 11. I believe he also did Matchstick Men. But this might have been his first major studio picture, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the studio was not super jazzed about it, but they were going to make it. Small budget. It ended up costing about $12 million. Sadly, it only made a little more than $2 million back. So, like I said, it was a pretty serious flop, unfortunately. But so they had the screenplay. Now, the original director that they had was Milcho Manchevsky, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who I believe is Macedonian. And he had just won an Oscar, I think, for like Best Foreign Language Film or something like that. So they gave this to him. He was on the film for like 3 weeks, and it just clearly was not working out. The producers weren't loving it. The crew wasn't loving it. The actors weren't loving it. It just didn't seem like a good fit. So that director was fired. At which point the studio wanted to bring in, I can't remember the dude's name, but the guy that directed Home Alone 3 and some more, like, I think Big Mama's House, maybe, like, I can't remember, but some more kind of big screen, like, comedy shit like that, like wacky comedy. So they were going to bring that guy in, and all the actors basically said, we are walking off the set of this fucking movie if you bring that guy in. So Robert Carlyle, the awesome Scottish actor, said, why don't you hire Antonia Bird? Now, she is a British director. She sadly passed away of cancer in 2013 at the age of 62, sadly. She had made a lot of British dramas and would go on, but this is, I think, her only major, Hollywood picture. It wasn't a good experience for her. She didn't love it. So she kind of went back to Britain and did stuff over there. But her and Robert Carlyle had worked together before in a movie called Priest, I think, which is actually like really awesome if you haven't seen it. And I think one called Face. And so he was a big fan of, they collaborated a lot. And actually, I think after this movie came out, I think they actually started a production company together, if I'm not mistaken. So he suggested that she come in, and she agreed to come in and do it with basically only a week to prepare. So she was brought in kind of last minute. So like I said, considering that she was brought in, that she was the third director that was brought in like at the absolute last minute, it's amazing that this movie turned out as awesome as it turned out. Also have to point out the cinematographer is the same guy that did a lot of Nicholas Roeg's movies. He did Don't Look Now. I think he did Man Who Fell to Earth. So the cinematography looks fantastic. It's supposed to be set in the Sierra Nevadas. I believe they shot it in Mexico and I believe in Eastern Europe somewhere, maybe the Czech Republic. But it actually does look like the Sierra Nevadas, all these snowy mountains. And it's really, you can really tell, because you know how sometimes when they do movies and it's supposed to be wintertime and the actors, like, they don't even look cold. You know what I mean? Like, their breath isn't even, they don't even have like the breath puffs coming out or anything like that. This movie looks wet and cold and miserable and dirty, and so it really lends a lot to the kind of atmosphere of this film, because it looks like it was really fucking cold there and nobody was having that good a time. So this movie has an all-star fucking cast. Not only do you have Robert Carlyle, you also have Guy Pearce, Jeffrey Jones, David Arquette. There's just like so many great actors in this. So the story of this was based loosely on kind of like Donner Party kind of stuff. Also a little bit on Alfred Packer, who I believe we did the Colorado Cannibal. I think we did a show about him not too long ago. I think when we were doing like one of those Old West or like Cannibals of the Old West type of show. But we did talk about him, and this is kind of loosely based on that. So this is set in 1847 during the Mexican-American War. Now, John Boyd, who's played by Guy Pearce, he is a second lieutenant at the beginning. Now, he's in this battle, and he actually kind of like chickens out like in the middle of his battle, because all of his like the dudes in his regiment are getting like shot left and right in this battle and they're losing. So he starts getting scared. So he just pretends to be dead so that he doesn't have to fight anymore. Now, as it happens, because he plays dead, like the Mexican army kind of gathers all the bodies up. And so he ends up underneath this big pile of his dead comrades, and taken back to the army camp, like the Mexican army camp. Now, on the way there, since he's underneath all these dead bodies, he's basically drinking in the blood of like his commanding officer, which is implied later on actually gave him the strength to climb out of, underneath all these bodies and take out the whole entire like Mexican army regiment like single-handedly. So at the beginning, like he's actually given a commendation and he's given a promotion to captain, but because his commanding officer knew that the only reason that he was able to take out that whole regiment was because he, chickened out and played dead, it was an act of cowardice. So they're like, well, for, publicity's sake, we'll have to like, make you a war hero, blah, blah, blah. But we know that you only did it because you were being a weenie. So they actually send him to this remote outpost, Fort Spencer, out in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, where they kind of send all of their misfits and losers. You know what I mean? So I've seen several reviews of this that called it like the island of misfit toys. It's essentially like that. So Fort Spencer, once he gets out there, has kind of a little ragtag team of people that are there. It's under the command of Colonel Hart, who's played by Jeffrey Jones, and he's kind of just like, like he's an older kind of chill type of dude, and he's just like, whatever, we're just out here. I'm just out here reading my books, and nothing ever happens. It's, it's fine. So he's just gonna like stay out there and collect his pension or whatever. You also have Private Toffler, who is like the, he's the religious guy, like the little priest or whatever. Private Cleves, who is just basically a giggling drug addict, smoking the peyote and all that kind of stuff. You also have Major Knox, who was a veterinarian in his former life, so he kind of serves as the like camp's ersatz doctor, but he is also a hopeless drunk and is pretty much drunk all the time. You also have Private Reich, who I think it's funny that they called him that, because he's kind of like the blonde Aryan Superman. Like he's like super soldier, but he's also kind of like psychotic. He's got like these bright like blue like crazy eyes and shit like that, and he's just like very, you know what I mean? He's that type of dude. And then there is a brother and sister, Native American, who are just kind of like general crew around the place. Their names are George and Martha. So Boyd gets there. He's kind of introduced to all these, quirky individual people. And not too long after that, a stranger turns up at Fort Spencer in the form of Robert Carlyle, calling himself Calhoun. Now, he kind of falls. He looks like he's starving and he's frozen and all this other stuff. So, of course, they bring him in to help him out. And as soon as he recovers, he tells them the horrifying story of him and a party of 5 other people who were trying to basically do a wagon train through the Sierra Nevadas. The leader of this group was a dude named Colonel Ives, who said that he had this shortcut through the mountains, but it was actually much longer. They ended up getting trapped in the mountains in the winter and ended up in this cave where, spoiler alert, they all ended up pretty much having to eat one another. So at this stage, Calhoun admits that he ate, some of the people that were dead, because he said, we ate the oxen, we ate the horses, we ate our shoes, we ate our belts, and then finally, one of the other settlers like died of starvation, so we ended up having to eat him, and I'm not proud of it, but that's just what happened. He's like, but Colonel Ives, who was the leader of the thing, once he tasted human flesh, he started acting like a savage and ended up murdering like the other members of the party. At which point Calhoun says that he just like got the fuck out of Dodge, even though he said, I feel bad because I left Colonel Ives there with the one woman that was in the party, but I just couldn't take it anymore, so I had to leave, and this is, where I turned up. Now, while he's telling this story, George, one of the Native American, people that lives at the settlement, he's like looking real askance at this guy, because obviously most people nowadays know. I feel like it was less widely known, like mythology back in 1999 when this movie came out, but now there's been several movies like Antlers and stuff like that are about the Wendigo, or Wendigo as they say in this movie, which is actually I think a more correct pronunciation if I'm not mistaken. So he's basically like, okay, well, a dude that eats another man's flesh sometimes will become sort of possessed by, the wendigo demon, and they just keep eating and eating and eating, and they never get enough, and that's, they just become savages, essentially. So he's kind of like worried about this dude. Obviously, none of the, white settlers, the white people at the camp really care that much about that. They're just basically like, okay, well, you left this woman in this cave with Colonel Ives, and maybe he's going to eat her, so... Colonel Hart is like, well, this is our job. We have to go and save her. We have to go, we have to send out a rescue mission. So that's what they do. So they hike for 3 days to try and find this cave that he was talking about. And they do find it, but when they get there, should I say spoiler? I just feel like this movie came out such a long time ago. It came out in 1999, but I feel like a lot of people maybe haven't seen it. But I will say, I don't know, because I think the trailer kind of spoils it, so I guess I don't feel too bad. But so they get to the cave, and Reich and Boyd go in the cave, and they find a bunch of skeletons and stuff like that, but the way the shit is situated... They're sitting there going, hang on. Didn't Calhoun say that, that they ate a couple of the people, but then there was 2 left that were still alive, and it was Colonel Ives that was doing all this shit, and then he took off? He's like, okay, so then why are there 5 skeletons, goopy skeletons, stripped of their flesh, hanging from the ceiling of this cave? And then they realize, holy shit, this is a trap. Calhoun has led them to this cave, and it's actually, he was the one that ate all of the ones. So he's either Colonel Ives the whole time, or he took over the body. I kind of feel like he was probably just Colonel Ives the whole time, and he just took on the persona of one of the other members of the party to make himself, look more innocent. So I think that's what it is. So basically, he led them to this place, as a trap because he wants to eat them. So he ends up killing, a whole bunch of the members of the party. Boyd escapes by jumping off this cliff and, breaking his leg. And he falls into this pit with Reich, who, is killed. The thing about it is that Boyd... also has some of this human flesh kind of thing going on too, because if you remember at the very beginning of the movie, that's how he ended up wiping out that whole Mexican army garrison, was because he, swallowed the blood and flesh of all the bodies that were on top of him. So he essentially also has the Wendigo demon inside him too, but he's been able to resist it, even though it's very difficult for him. It's interesting the way that Antonia Bird portrayed the Wendigo thing. It's kind of more, she kind of portrays it like an addiction, you know what I mean? Or like a disease, which I guess it kind of is. So the main moral kind of conflict comes from Robert Carlyle's character, Calhoun, or Colonel Ives, if you would prefer, because that's who he actually is, who has embraced the Wendigo thing, and it has embraced cannibalism because it makes him stronger. He, healed, he had tuberculosis before and it healed it. And he's just like, I feel fantastic. So he's kind of taken it on board. So he's just like, I'm down. I'm a cannibal now. Whereas Boyd, he has tasted human flesh and ends up having to eat parts of Reich when he's, escaping from the cannibal to heal his leg up so he can get back to the camp and destroy the other cannibal. But he's, morally averse to eating other people. So it's this constant struggle that he really, really wants to eat other people, but, in a drug addict kind of way. But he's just bound and determined to kind of keep his humanity. So that's kind of where the whole moral conundrum comes from, with Robert Carlyle's character and Guy Pearce's character both being cannibals, but one of them being a reluctant cannibal. So I don't want to spoil too much about the way it goes from then on, because I kind of feel like it's best appreciated just letting it play out the way it's going to play out. As I said, this is it's a fascinating movie. This is an odd, wonderful little film. And I really do kind of feel like it's sad that, I say this a lot because particularly horror, I feel like sometimes stuff comes out that's maybe kind of a little bit ahead of its time, or people didn't really know what to make of it. And as I said, even this one, audiences didn't get it, and critics didn't really seem to get it either. So it seemed to take a really long time to find its audience, and I don't think it has as big an audience as I think it probably should have, because this is actually a pretty brilliant little movie, and it's just so weird. Just the tone of it is kind of all over the place, but it also kind of works, which, you know, it's very difficult to blend genres in this way and still have it be a successful movie. But the way that this one is done, it's done in like such an odd, like off-kilter kind of way. You don't really see, I've never really seen a movie that's much like this, you know what I mean? And especially not from a major studio, for Christ's sake. I mean, this is a very, very unusual film. Just like I said, you can't even, it's a Western period piece type of thing, you know, kind of like war movie type of thing. But then it's also, you know, really gory, and it also has horror elements to it, particularly in Robert Carlyle's character, who, man, for a little bitty dude, you know, he's kind of he's like a kind of a smaller, like a wiry kind of fella. And, but man, he is terrifying in this, but also strangely seductive and really kind of like funny. And so like all of the, but not funny in like an overtly zany kind of way. I mean, just the humor in this just hit me right. Even when I first saw this in the theater, like back in 1999, I was just dying. I just thought this movie was hysterical. Like not, you know, like I said, not in an overtop zany way, but just in that black comedy kind of way. And it's just, I love that kind of strange humor like that, and it just cracked me up. And I was kind of like, when I was in the theater, I was like, why am I the only one laughing at this? Like, it's funny, but I don't know if other people thought it was supposed to be funny, even though I did see some trailers at the time that kind of I saw one trailer that tried to make it look more like a slasher movie, and then there was one trailer that kind of tried to make it look like a comedy. And it's really neither of those things. It's just, like I said, it's all over the place tonally, but it still works, though. I have to bring up the score as well. The score was actually, it was two British composers. They didn't work together. They just independently came up with music for the movie. The first of these was Michael Nyman. And the other one was Damon Albarn of Blur and Gorillaz fame. And the score for this is, I kind of see it like in the horror community, this is kind of considered one of the best scores, like horror scores, particularly for the 90s, or, you know, just in general. But it is also very weird. This score is just very, very strange. It kind of has like some banjo kind of stuff. And like during a couple scenes, like there's one chase scene where Calhoun, or Colonel Ives, if you prefer, is chasing Boyd like through this forest, you know, being his all cannibalistic and stuff. And the music is almost kind of like, almost shades into like this kind of goofy banjo kind of thing. But it's just one of the oddest horror movie scores you will ever hear, but it's also kind of awesome, and it totally works. You wouldn't think that it would. This is one of those movies that, like I said, if you talk about all the disparate elements of it, it's just, there's like, oh, there's no way that could like work and make a fantastic movie, but it totally does. I don't know how, like, it all somehow miraculously all came together into this awesome, like, wonderful, fantastic cannibal movie, but it totally works. Like every actor in it, it's just so quirky and weird, and I fucking love every second of it. Also, you could read it in a lot of different ways too. Like I said, black comedy. You know, there's a lot of gallows humor in it. It's also kind of a parody or a satire of the idea of manifest destiny, or, you know, the Western expansion, where it's sort of making the comparison of, you know, Robert Carlyle's character, Colonel Ives, who is planning to essentially set up a cannibal outpost. So all of the people that are coming into California, like during, you know, when they're coming looking for gold or whatever, he's going to like eat some of them. So it's kind of like making a comparison between, you know, manifest destiny, colonialism, stuff like that, with cannibalism, where it's just kind of like, you know, they're just eating everything. They're eating all the resources. So it kind of makes that, it's not super heavy-handed, I don't think, but it's there if you want to take it. There's also a very, very large homoerotic type of thing to it. Again, not super overt, and it's kind of done very cheekily. But it totally is in there, and even Robert Carlyle said even when we were working on the movie, some of the scenes were just like, just kiss him already, you know what I mean? Because it's kind of equating cannibalism with, it's kind of this virility, masculinity, kind of a homoerotic sort of subtext to it. But like I said, done in a very cheeky, kind of like funny kind of way, you know what I mean? Like this sort of sardonic kind of look at it. So that's also in there if you want to take it as well. But again, this is just a fun, I just have a lot of fun with this. And every single time I've seen it, because I've seen it several times, and I think I actually had it on DVD. So I've seen it several times since I first saw it in the theater. And every single time I see it, I just love it even more. Like I just find something else in it, like something new to love about it. And I think that's like the hallmark of the best movies. And it just makes me sad that this isn't a better known film. It's not for everybody, obviously, but if you like kind of Western style stuff, like I said, if you like Bone Tomahawk, this is tonally not exactly like that, but it's kind of along the same lines, but also kind of mixed with this subtle, like kind of sardonic black comedy, and it's pretty gory. I don't know if it's as gory as Bone Tomahawk, although Bone Tomahawk, I feel like that's mostly just that one scene, like that one scene that everybody talks about, which is legit one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. This one has a lot of gore in it, and it has a lot of kind of broken legs and shit like that, so it's very, very bloody and very gory, but I don't know if it's as violent. I don't know. But it is like pretty gory. So if you like gory stuff and you like a lot of kind of blackly humorous stuff about eating other people, then this should be right up your alley. It's definitely one of the best cannibal movies ever made. Definitely one of the best Wendigo movies ever made. And honestly, like I said, this came out in 1999, which was before I feel like the Wendigo myth was really that well known in American culture. I kind of feel like I said, lately there's been more movies with using that mythology, but not so much like back when this came out. I feel like it was kind of a real original concept for 1999, and it's just a shame that it seemed like it didn't really find an audience until much later on. And I will mention too that Antonia Bird, she had always, this came out kind of the way she wanted it, but she'd always meant to recut it because she said, like I said, she was British and she didn't really like working with major Hollywood studios. She thought it was, just a clusterfuck and she couldn't take it. And because they just kept meddling and everything. And so they recut the movie in some ways that she wasn't real happy about. So she always kind of wanted to recut the movie. But sadly, as I said, she passed away in 2013 and she never got a chance to. One of the things she didn't like was that, and I'm not a big fan of this either. It doesn't ruin the movie or anything because it's just a second. But at the very beginning of the movie, it starts with a quote, like the Nietzsche quote, the one about, in fighting monsters, don't become a monster, blah, blah, blah. And then underneath it, it says, quote, eat me, anonymous, which funny because it's a cannibal movie. But I kind of feel like that sense of humor is not the same sense of humor that's on display in the movie. You know what I mean? It seems like you can tell this was a British director because it has a very British, dry humor to it, which I really like. But I guess a lot of American audiences weren't down with it. Especially back in 1999, they didn't really get it, or they didn't know why it was supposed to be funny. Because like I said, it's not jokes. It's just some of the situations or some of the character quirks are funny, situationally funny. And like I said, the lines are just very dry. And that's what's funny about them, I guess. It's hard to explain, but it is a much more British humor than American humor, I guess. But yeah, so she didn't really like that quote thing at the beginning because she said that just seemed kind of stupid. And, again, it doesn't really match the humor of the rest of the film. And she also made the point, she's like, well, I kind of feel like a lot of Hollywood studios think their audiences are stupid, but they're not. It's almost kind of like they had to put that there hey, it's supposed to be funny. And she's like, yeah, we didn't really need that, but whatever. Like I said, it doesn't ruin the movie or anything because it's just a second, but you could totally trim that off and it would be completely fine, which was one of the things she wanted to do. But yeah, if you have not seen Ravenous from 1999, please check it out. It is just one of the most criminally underrated horror films of all time. And it's just so great. Like, just the cast, the ensemble cast, just so good. Robert Carlyle is amazing in it. And it's just so fun and funny and just, I don't know, it's just so odd that it just warms my heart, like, every time I see it, that a movie this weird was made by a major studio, even though it didn't do very well. I'm just kind of like, it just makes me so happy that that this movie exists, because I just fucking love it so much. And like I said, it's easily one of my favorite horror movies from the 1990s, which, like I said, probably my least favorite decade for horror movies, but a lot of good ones did come out during that time period, and this is easily one of them. So please check it out. I actually watched it on Amazon Prime. You can't get it for free. I think you have to rent it, but it's only $3.99 and it's totally worth it. And, you know, it's worth more than that too. But I think you can rent it on YouTube for the same price. So you can see it in a lot of streaming services. So please check it out. Or if you've seen it, if you're part of the cult of Ravenous, so one of the people that saw it when it came out, like I did, and we're kind of like, why aren't more people talking about this movie? It's like so awesome. But, you know, so if you've seen it, let me know what you thought of it. We'll have a discussion about it in the comments. And that will do it for this Flickers of Fear, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.